Okay, let's start. And today I want to talk about some of our research regarding like globalization, assimilation, that kind of stuff. Personally, I found this very interesting because this is relevant to our time, and it's related to like our personal experience. So it's very practical, and it's interesting. So the culture, or they call it culture theory, very simple idea. Basically, for the immigrants like me, like a first generation immigrant, when you come to a host country, here like come to the United States, and how do the immigrants react? How do they react to like the mainstream American culture? There are four possibilities. The theory states that you can try to assimilate into the American culture, or people kind of give up or actually refuse to assimilate, or they just stick to their original culture. Then you have people indifferent between two cultures. Actually, they want to give up both cultures. Then you have people high on both. So basically, high on American, low on Chinese, high on American, high on Chinese, low on American, high on Chinese, and low on both. So that's basically the culture theory. The theory that has been nicely captured, like how the first generation immigrants, how do they assimilate into like a mainstream culture? So you have people refuse to assimilate, and have people just want to assimilate and give up their kind of homeland culture. I actually have been applying the theory to globalization. So what is globalization? Globalization is a simple idea. So our time is what? Interdependent. Actually, I'm going to write morning a book chapter on the globalization. So it's related to free trade. That's one part. Then also the technology, especially about the transportation. For example, you've been to like a Panama Canal, it's a transportation. There you can see like a huge cargo tank. The technology has made what? The transportation cost almost like zero. Then you have the communication technology, so internet probably. So all this kind of making our world small, highly interdependent. So some people will say this is a free movement of goods, money, finance, technology, and also including people and ideas. So if you look at the history, the Silk Road, basically the Europeans fancy about the Chinese silk, also related to like the tea. The tea trade is a very interesting business. So that's basically globalization. In like around when I was in my doctoral program, we are required to have a major and a minor. The major was in marketing, so you have a business major. Then my minor was comparative sociology. Actually, I'm grateful to fit in that kind of setup. I just want to broaden like your perspective and build up a solid foundation. So the sociology professor I work with, her name is Akiko Hashimoto, and she has a very interesting kind of history. She was born in London, brought up in Berlin. Her father, he was a Japanese diplomat, and later she had a PhD sociology from Yale, and I think she has an accent-free kind of English. I remember one year, that's around like the Japanese surrender, probably August 15th. So Pitt had a seminar about the comparison between Japanese and the German attitude toward basically the war crime. And her main point is, it's not about culture. It's not because some people claim it's because the German culture is the guilt culture, and the Japanese culture is the shame culture. She actually traced back the U.S. policy, basically after World War II, how the U.S. supported the Japanese because they want to use the Japanese to counter what? The red communism threat. So for the Japanese, that's lucky. For the Chinese, unfortunately, the Chinese people were under the red communism rule. That's very unfortunate. I've been teaching international marketing, so I'm really fond of the globalization topic. And I was a freshman in 1989, so went through the student protest. Back then, I was just such a simple-minded first-year student, had no clue about what's going on. And but I'm very proud of that my appearance. Actually, immediately after June 4th, I rode bike across the Chang'an Street. Back when I was young, really not afraid of all these kind of consequences. I have experienced, the globalization, at least the positive side. For the Chinese, that would be 2000 admitted into WTO and the kind of free trade. That really kind of gave a boost to the Chinese globalization. So some people view like globalization is what? Globalization is like westernization, modernization, a different term. And from the culture perspective, how do people identify with globalization? So that's kind of my research question. I basically propose some people kind of they embrace globalization. Some people actually they reject globalization. And by the way, I'm not the first one. There are already brilliant mind in the social psychology, sociology, anthropology. They had the idea. I just based on my kind of personal experience, and especially my reading of Professor Li Ziho's 3 books on the especially the Chinese modern history of thought history of thought. Back then I just swallowed, I didn't really understand. But anyway, I had been kind of borrow his stuff. So his main point is the Chinese, why we didn't modernize was because we were invaded by the Japanese, and so although the Western powers, the past Christian Chinese was for the salvation, save your country, because your country, your nation might be destroyed or wiped out from the global village. So between like modernization and salvation, the Chinese people take salvation. So that's his point. I mean, his point is quite different, but there are lots of strong, serious criticism about his approach. Now you look at it for the last 3 or 4 decades, there was no foreign threat, and the Chinese didn't wholeheartedly embrace globalization. So that's kind of my personal experience. from a psychology perspective, how do people basically identify the global culture? Do they assimilate? Do they kind of contrast? Do they love globalization or actually hate globalization? So I basically apply what assimilation framework to the globalization research. Apparently the topic kind of resonates with many people. So 2009, that year I was kind of lucky. I have two publication in GCR, Journal for Consumer Research. That's one of the 4 flagship journals called behavior. For people with behavioral approach, which means you apply social psychology, anthropology into marketing here. So I basically argue, like in the Chinese context, they have the brands like Coke, Pepsi, kind of global brands or Western brands. Then you have the local brands called the Feitang Cola. And I basically argue, depending on the Chinese consumers, their attitude toward the globalization. Do they have a global identity? Like, do they identify they are part of the global culture? So I came up with a measure, and so if they identify with the global culture, then more likely they will prefer this called global brand. And on the other hand, and if they identify with the localization, they reject globalization, likely they will embrace the local brand. So that's the main idea. Like any kind of research, you start with a simple main effect, and then you have the interaction, and that's just kind of marketing, the academic kind of drill. You have a mediation moderation, which means why that effect happening, and how can you make the effect stronger or weaker. You can see the business implication or the managerial relevance is basically how do you compete. If you kind of a global brand, if you pay attention like Coke, Pepsi, their commercial, their advertising, their slogan, they tend to emphasize their global kind of position. But Feitang Cola or these local Chinese brands, they tend to capitalize on their local origin. So that's kind of a application in the marketing context. I personally find this is very interesting. It still can we can use that one to explain quite some phenomena. Related to the globalization, I've been studying culture differences. For example, American culture, Chinese culture. And this morning, actually, I was listening to one guy's really talk, and he interviewed one of the former top-ranked Chinese government official. His name is Wu Guang. He actually was responsible for the 1988, I think, the political reform under the great politician Zhao Ziyang. Then he mentioned globalization. Why the Chinese economy took off, became the number 2? That's because the Chinese, especially Xinjiang, decided to embrace the globalization. And where the globalization is from? The globalization is from what? Originally from West, basically Western democracy. It never came from what? Never came from authoritarian regime. So I think that's kind of modern time. That's actually related to what? Related to Adam Smith, his view about the modern economics and the view about free trade, about specialization. So we can actually use this lens to what? Look at the modern economic history. And for the Chinese, we are very into what? The opinion war. Basically how the British forced the Chinese, the Qing regime open up. The communists, almost the Chinese kind of propaganda, tend to emphasize how the Chinese were accumulated or forced to open up. But you never talk about actually the British basically after the Industrial Revolution, the British had a really huge addiction to tea, and they want to what? They want to have free trade. And Adam Smith basically played a role here. So David Hume, that's basically related to what? The industrialization just open up what? The production capacity. Jeffrey Sachs' book is, until like the 1850s, and the human race, our living standard actually quite low. This is because of our production capacity. I remember when I grew up, it's kind of agricultural economy, self-sufficient. So you didn't have enough food to eat. The industrialization changed that completely. Britain was at the forefront, vanguard of the modern economy. So they industrialized. I actually went to Manchester to visit to understand. Max Weber had the thinkers, basically the Protestants working ethics. That's the key, the religion. So when the British modernized or industrialized, they actually want to have free trade with the Qing Chinese. They have a huge demand for tea, but the Chinese emperor Qianlong told Sir Macanani, say, oh, we Chinese, we have everything. We don't need your foreign barbaric stuff. The Chinese actually was very ethnocentric. By the way, that's not unique to Chinese. Most people, all the people kind of ethnocentric, think their culture is the best. So when I'm teaching like international marketing, this is a concept for the students to understand. Ethnocentrism, then self-reference criteria. Basically means we tend to use our own culture as a reference point to make a decision. Because that's only available for the culture lens or reference point we have, we can make a decision. It's hard to overcome. That's kind of really cool. Nutritional psychology will be the stereotype, the biases we see, all the behavior economics. So marketing is related to the field. Anyway, kind of getting back to topics about the globalization and culture differences. One point, the modern globalization originated from where? From the West, because the free market system, democracy, political system, and these are what? These are the systems basically respect every individual's rights, liberty, property, and their preference. So to develop basically means what? It basically means individualize or adopt individualism kind of value system. And look at what happened to China. I just talked to my parents and my older brother and sister. They are experiencing basically the urbanization. We are from a small city, a small town called Linyi, and it's famous for what? For the first Chinese millionaire, Yi Dun. I think I would tell you like our county, in China it's called a county, and the county will become part of a Yuncheng city called Qu, or the district of Yuncheng. And there are two. So Linyi and the Xiaxian become. Yuncheng used to be called Yanhu, basically Salt Lake, and our hometown actually is very famous or well known for the long history. I think 1 year the Chinese national entrance exam for the subject of Chinese literature, they had a question was what place was originally called China as Yuncheng, and the most famous person or celebrity from our hometown is Guan Yu, Lao de Guan. That's very famous, important like in the business culture. He's a symbol of what? He's a symbol of trust, loyalty. So if you look at the culture differences, let's say compare like American culture and the Chinese culture differences. Peter Hofstede, the Dutch industrial psychologist, and he was working for IBM. That's back in the 70s. That's a global firm. If you look at the global firm, that's basically after World War II. Many of these American firms. So they have employees all over the world. Like the most American firms, they like what? They like to have the standardized test to screen their kind of employee. So he found out it's interesting for the same set of questions, for example, work balance, what's important in life, and how do you view like the boss and the subordinates relationship. There are systematic country differences. For example, the responses from the Indian will be different from what the responses from, say, Greece or from Netherlands. Basically, he used what factor analysis, did the kind of analysis on these responses across, I think, usually 20-some countries, and he came up with like 4 factors. First one is called the individualism, collectivism. This means whether you emphasize group or you emphasize the individual. The second one is power distance. It's basically how do people resolve the relationship between supervisor and the subordinate. Like how do you do you encourage like everyone participating in the decision, or actually it's more like the boss orders and rest of the team just carry out the orders? When you look at Chinese culture, that's more what is a high power distance culture. That's kind of related to the Confucius value. Then they have the other dimension like called the masculinity, femininity, or certain orders. And later they have the long-term, short-term orientation by the Canadian psychologist. His name is Michael Bond. They all have Chinese names. He was a professor at Chinese University of Hong Kong. But looking at the culture differences, you have another perspective to understand the globalization. Globalization is not only about production, exchange, but also about what? About the value, or the value system conflict or differences. Some people say like, why China is so difficult to change or to actually fully modernize, globalize. You blame like the one-party system, blame the communists, their ideology. And some people will say, you look at our culture, we have almost like 4,000 or 5,000 years kind of feudalistic, basically the dynasty rule. So emperor. It's basically the claim that China has a long history of what? The authoritarian regime, or the high partisan culture. The economic system is what? Still backward, it's not fully industrialized. So why China is not a free market, free market? So one of the first main explanations is just because of cultural values. But if you look at Hong Kong, Singapore, Taiwan, or South Korea, you'll see like the cultural values are not what? Not the most important factor, or not deterministic. Maybe the more important one is what? It's basically the political determination. Or after the country is fully industrialized, then people will buy into this individualism kind of values. This is happening actually in China, for example. The birth rate exacerbated by the one-child policy, but there are other factors. So the shrinking population, the younger generation actually what? They're more into hedonic kind of consumption. So unlike their parents, their grandparents, maybe my generation or my parents' generation, to survive is the key. So let me recap. We talk about the culture simulation theory, then the globalization kind of theory, and then the culture differences. I basically try to combine them together. So I'm the one basically in marketing to articulate, to integrate this different kind of stream of research and make them kind of meaningful. To connect to what? To connect to consumer responses and some marketing implications. Here, you look at left side, it's GM, many people. So that kind of relate to the education. We have so many friends, they are so anxious about their kids. You know, they were very successful when they got into the college. The universities like Yale to US. Maybe sometimes like Yale to US. But because it's record for producing high-ranked government officials called civil servants. Civil servants, they're not servants actually, they're the masters. They're the civil masters. And that's kind of related to what the civil servant, civil service exam, you know, originated in the Sui dynasty. Kind of developed in Tang dynasty, kind of really refined during the Ming Qing dynasty. So most of my students, they have been working with me about globalization, culture differences. Personally, I found this is very interesting. It's just so timely, so relevant. And you look at Brexit, America First. It's basically the populism or nationalism of our time. It's basically the globalization project didn't work out. So that started Fort Berlin War in 1989, then the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was an evil empire. It pretended to have some very liberal, nice ideology, but in practice. So I went through that kind of life. They call it the planned economy of socialism. You know, they all have very nice labels, but reality is terrible. It's against human nature. So globalization, now let's look at the key why the globalization is originated from the West. I think there are several kind of key points. First one is the respect for property rights. Unconditional support. Unconditional kind of respect. I used to teach a video called Commanding Heights, talking about, you know, in South America, the economy was not kind of developed because the property rights are not well recognized or well documented. That's why the communism or socialism are evil, because they can take away your property at will without any fair compensation. That basically discourages people from producing any kind of a meaningful, useful contribution to the society. But you have incentive, regardless how hard you're working, and they can take away. Then what's the point? Why you should work hard? So fundamentally, socialism, communism are against property rights. Second one is full respect for the individual liberty. That will lead to what? That will lead to innovation. So we have some data on that, on the globalization and the innovation. So I don't think it's random. There's some fundamental logic why the modern globalizations are coming from the West. And what's the time? Do not from what? Do not come from the authoritarian regime. Because they don't respect what? They don't respect your personal right. So in that regard, I have a good friend who's a professor of law, and his specialization is organic food and contractual law. So he recommended me with some books. It's very, very enlightening. The legal field, they have got more refined understanding about how to divide the blame. Who should be blamed for here? So whenever you have a conflict, a confrontation, how do you resolve those differences? So it's a well-established system. For example, if you get involved with traffic accident, they will try to find the reason or causes and who should be blamed, but how much. So they have an unconditional respect or support for the private property. And it's very interesting. We talk about the will, how to carry out the will. The key is basically respect what the individual right. The people who was going to pass away, they have their will. Their will is the most important. The lawyers basically try to carry out the will based on the living will. Basically, what do you want to accomplish? They will not, just say, okay, because of this, the Chinese culture say, because these are your kids, so they can have your property automatically. It's not. And this is really important. And he actually was working with course, talking about the modern economy, free trade, free transaction, and how they relate to the property rights. So this kind of related about identity, globalization. I think I'm actually going to I'm going to stop the video here. I don't want to make it too long. So this will